Okay. Anyway, Brian, I'm going to turn it over to you. Take it away.
Sure. Thank you, Linda, and Tavonia. Thank you for some of the things you mentioned are themes that you'll hear in the presentation I make as well. We're going to break things in today into sort of three sections. One, I'm going to talk about social media and some of the problems that we see in the monolithic platforms that are out there and what's happening in social media today. Second, we're going to talk a little bit about how blockchain can apply. Blockchain is a wonderful technology. And this might be a little bit controversial because I'm speaking at the Blockchain Chambers event. It doesn't solve every problem in the world, but it can solve a lot of problems. And so we have a particular view on where it can provide the most benefit for social media, at least in the immediate term. And then finally, I'll talk a little bit about the platform that we provide to our partners and our clients, and a little bit about the blockchain ecosystem that the chamber has developed with us. So just kicking it off with the section about the problems with social media today, we see 5 major flaws that exist that make much of social media actually a net harm to society. And I'll just go down through those 1 through 5. The first is that these are monolithic platforms. They're built as sort of a one size to fit all, but it is not a one size fit all sort of market or need that society has. The platforms today are built based on the advertising business model, and it's not even all advertising, it's specific forms of advertising that they serve well, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. But it's really, we see it's impossible for these platforms to be responsive to all the different stakeholders, all the needs in which a society operates. And Tavonia spoke eloquently about how there's communities who just are not getting their needs met by operating on Facebook, and Pam gave some real specific examples that of people being affected by that, and that's affecting everyone in lots of ways. So, and we'll speak to that a little bit more as we go on. The second major problem is that these are major platforms that are really built around the algorithm. The algorithm is king, and that algorithm really it's focused on valuing engagement and quantity over quality. There's no transparency into those algorithms, so we as consumers, as government regulators, as people in society, we don't really know how content is filtered, how it's blocked, how it's amplified, how it's suppressed. We don't know. There's no transparency. Those decisions are really centralized behind a small team of people, sometimes an individual within these large companies. So it's very, we touched on the theme of this being unempowering. It's very disempowering when there's no transparency into the algorithms, which really determine what people are seeing, what they're reading, what's getting out there. The second issue is that many of these platforms have moved toward really a direct response advertising model. They're supporting direct response advertising even more than branding per se. There is currently a Stop Hate for Profit campaign being led by the American Defamation League, by a number of other organizations that have approached advertisers in conjunction with some of the largest advertisers, names like Coca-Cola and others who are out there, to basically say to Facebook, hey, until you have a better way to tamp down on some of the hate that's being spread on Facebook, we're not going to advertise on your platforms. And they've gone to Facebook, they've said for the month of July and possibly later, they're not going to do any advertising on Facebook. And from what has been reported in the press, the response by Facebook was pretty tepid. They didn't really, they met and they listened, but they really were not going to be responsive to 10 or 12 suggestions that were made by this group. And people who do the analysis have said, well, Facebook can live without these advertisers. The top 100 largest brands in America spend about $4.2 billion a year on Facebook, which is a platform earning $70 billion a year. At least those were the numbers for last year. And so that's about 6% of their revenue, the largest 100 brands. The majority of their advertisers are really small advertisers who are looking, smaller advertisers who are looking for direct response, sort of who are pursuing a direct response sort of approach where they want to be able to access the data and advertise to very specific people who fit very specific profiles. And so if the largest branding companies fall out, Facebook will fill that inventory with others, and might be a little cheaper for a few months, but essentially it's not going to change them. And they've basically said as much. We're not going to be responsive to this because we have our own approach on and our own beliefs that we're supposedly protecting. So the direct response advertising is really what's driving the financials at Facebook. And in that business model, they want the data. They need to know every detail they can have on people because they're trying to micro-target people in that sense. So whether the Stop Pay for Profit campaign has an impact long-term, we'll see. But so far, it appears it's been pretty ineffective at forcing change with Facebook. So third issue that's a problem with traditional social media, and that is that traditional media has been displaced. Newspapers have declined, small newspapers, many have gone out of business. We're seeing huge drops of employment in this, and this has really come as a result of Facebook has taken free consumer-generated content, and they have essentially, that's what we're consuming. They're basically taking that, and that's replacing what traditionally have been news sources. And with that, we're losing some controls and safeguards. So when you have smaller communities producing content, you have an opportunity for reporters who are digging into the details. You have safeguards by people who are editorial boards before they're publishing things, and they have liability if they publish the wrong thing. So we're seeing this big drop in the traditional media, especially newspapers. So small local newspaper markets disappearing, and that's being replaced by all this free user-generated content by the larger platforms. And again, I'm focusing on Facebook right now, more so than some of the others that are drawing off the ad dollars. And so again,
and the funny thing is, we are live on Facebook right now.
And we're live on Facebook. That's right. So
we might be censored and lose our platform. I'm not sure.
We may, but again, that speaks to the need for more alternatives, more choices. So so this is another problem, is that much of the traditional safeguards built into distributed news gathering, news reporting sources are being centralized, and a lot of that through the platform, through Facebook, and replaced by what's essentially free content that's being generated. And you could argue that it's far lower quality than what was being produced in the past. So third major problem. Fourth problem that we see is that these platforms in many ways are exploitative and manipulative. And it's also causing a problem with privacy concerns. Now, there's a sort of micro and macro perspective on the free labor. So if I talk with attorneys and others, they'll say, well, as a consumer, I go in and I will agree to the terms of service of Facebook, and in consideration, I'm getting access to a platform. So I've given I'm getting something, and then my time, my energy, my data, the content I create, that's sort of the trade I make. So maybe at a micro level, you can argue that it's not exploitative because people are doing this, some parts of this willingly. They don't know how their data is being used oftentimes, but in terms of the just creation of content. But at a macro perspective, it's very exploitative because this is all built on, much of it's built on free labor. I mean, there's the technology side that they build the platform, but the content which really drives this, the activity, the engagement, that's all free. Facebook isn't paying for that. And the average American spends 2 hours a day. And let me just a step back to say, this presentation is very much US focused, US centric. It's a different dialogue that you have in other parts of the world. But in the US, we're spending 2 hours a day either consuming or creating content on social media. And if you calculate that out over the course of your lifetime, that means you're dedicating 5 years of your life on social media, and people aren't getting compensated for that. So if you can imagine doing anything for 5 years of your life and not getting compensated, while other people, investors in Facebook, Facebook itself, they're becoming multi-billionaires, you start to wonder that think that there's some inequity that's taking place, and that's not necessarily a fair equation. So other issues, there's a potential for lots of exploitation to take place through the tools of Facebook. Definitely manipulation. These are overlapping issues with some of the earlier ones we've mentioned. And then privacy and surveillance is becoming a concern. I think Facebook has 5,000 different data points that they have on each of their consumers, or can have up to that many. And so they know oftentimes where you're at, where you've gone, what you've done. And much of this is people are developing more an awareness of this, about that particular platform, and how much they know and how much that can be a particular problem. So for people who are advocates for privacy and are concerned about that, those concerns are rising because of the growth of these platforms. Let me move on. We talked earlier about accountability, and this is very much an issue on Facebook. So is information and misinformation that's, despite what they say they're trying to do, even just recently, you see the headline that half of the information about voters, mail-in voting, is actually wrong, false, or misleading. And half the information is getting spread in Facebook. And when you combine that with the amount of news or information that Americans are getting from these platforms, it really points to the fact that we're becoming increasingly misinformed in our society the more we're using these platforms. And part of that's possible because of issues related to Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which prevents these platforms from being held liable for the content that's being spread, because they're distributors, they're not the actual seen as the publishers. This leads to problems where accounts can be trolls, people can be fakes, again, misinformation. I think Tavonia talked a lot about fake accounts. This is something that's a real issue. You don't necessarily know who you're interacting with. Facebook employs 15,000 moderators to try and basically make judgments about the type of content that's flowing back and forth. And according to Mark Zuckerberg's own admission, they get it wrong 1 out of 10 times. And that equates to about 300,000 times they're wrong each day. So in Pam's example about information being spread or being suppressed, that was just something people were sharing for discussion, that's just one of many examples of them getting it wrong and trying to imagine the impact. And again, this is the problem with a centralized system, people who are further away from the decisions about what makes sense for a particular community or not. And so again, the accountability, the misinformation, the problem with moderation not working at scale under their business model, these are all things that contribute to some of the real major problems that we see with social media today. So switching gears, talking about how can blockchain help? Now these ideas are ones that are held by myself and people in our company in terms of how we think blockchain can be most helpful. It's not comprehensive, that others are going to have other ideas, but let me just go into what we feel are some of the key ways that blockchain can be helpful. First, we can look to rewarding those users who are creating value for the platforms. And so again, people are creating content that's creating value. It's not getting recognized today. So there's a way to create rewards. And many of these rewards can be in crypto, some sort of blockchain-based currency that verifies that people have done a particular activity and they can get rewarded. Microtransactions are all possible. I mean, blockchain just enables a whole bunch of wonderful things, blockchain and crypto, that enable people to get recognized for the value of what they're creating. And so that's one thing we definitely see as sort of top priority on how we can change the equation as it relates to some of these platforms. Identity verification, Tavonia had touched on this. We feel strongly about this. It has to be an important part of the equation. Our platforms that we basically manage, everyone's not created equal. If you are identified and you have your identity has been verified, you can have different role than people who come in as just consumers. And so part of the challenge is saying not everyone's equal, but if you own up to your identity, or there's a way it's verified, you can have more privileges than someone who doesn't. And so I think that there are a number of organizations and companies out there who are trying at a mass level, trying to create identity verification, whether it's for KYC purposes or for other reasons. We haven't seen anybody who's come out with a comprehensive across the board solution yet. We're hoping someone does, because then we could just plug it into our platform. In the interim, we're doing things that can lead to identity verification in different ways. But so far, there's no perfect solution. But we feel that what we're doing is a whole lot better than what is being done by any of the other sort of major platforms. But that's an area where we believe blockchain can play an important role. The third point where there's definitely a clear benefit is as it relates to data ownership, data portability, being able to say, this is who I am, this is the data that surrounds my identity, and being able to take that with you as being true owner of the data around your identity in your profile. And the state of California has looked at some possible bills where they actually would require some of these platforms to pay a data dividend, because clearly there's value there and it's not being recognized or rewarded to the individuals in the platform. And again, blockchain can play a really important role in that. A couple areas where we feel there are possible benefits, these are more optional as it relates to how blockchain can play a role, and that is in terms of creating decentralized social networks, decentralized ecosystems where each have their own governance, they each have their own brand, they each have their own currency. Decentralization and distributed governance has its own challenges, as many people see, and so, but in theory, there's a lot of potential benefits that could come from it. Another possible benefit is giving transparency to advertisers on how their ad dollars are being spent as it relates to reaching consumers. And there are some solutions out there looking at that. We think that that's definitely an area where there's a lot of possible benefits to blockchain use. And then finally, the area of these algorithms. Blockchains could be used to say, hey, this is what particular algorithms do, and provide that to consumers transparently. And if you imagine a world where there were lots of platforms instead of just really a couple that people are involved with, and each of them had a different set of algorithms they would use, and consumers had transparency vis-a-vis the blockchain into what those are, and they could opt in or opt out based on that. So there's some possible benefits there. Some of these things are sort of immediate possibilities, and others are further in the future. Now, finally, the last part, I wanted to talk about what we offer and what we're doing with the Chamber. We're offering as a company a platform where you can get lots of different social media functions and features that you would get if you were to go to Medium or LinkedIn or Yelp or Quora. And we put those into a single platform that's offered under our client's banner. And so what that means is that they can have those features that they feel important, that they want to offer, and provide a central place where those are offered to their community. So some of the features that discussion boards, discussion forums, feeds, these are things we've come to expect from our social media experiences. Again, we put them in there along with our own proprietary features that are specific to Brainsy. So we're sort of a mixture of what's available. And so as an example, I just wanted to mention a couple features that are just recently available that we've put into the platform. One, for example, we've had for a long time the ability for individuals to have Q&A with an expert or a contributor on the platform. And so that's something you can find on Quora, which is focused just on that QA sort of capability. Recently, on the blockchain ecosystem and our other platforms, we've set up so that you can do Q&A with an expert or a contributor, and they can respond in text. That's the way they've done it today. But they can also respond with a quick 30-second video where they actually record the response to or their answer to a particular question. So this is more of a multimedia richer experience. So we've seen platforms like TikTok sort of take off because they're very easy to use, they're very quick, and they take advantage of sort of the limited attention span that some people have. And we're basically bringing that to a professional sort of setting where if you have a question, you can pose it. Someone who's been vetted as an expert or a contributor on a particular community has ability to answer that in a quick 30-second format. So that's something that we offer. Another thing that we offer and that is now live on the blockchain ecosystem is something called the in-call feature. And what that enables people to do is to have a Zoom-like call, and whereby the person who's the presenter or the contributor, they actually can get paid for that call. So imagine a world where I want to have a 30-minute conversation with someone vis-a-vis video, and to date, they've been very inaccessible. Now I find a place where they're available on the platform. I go, I would pay them for whatever rate they've set for a 30-minute Zoom-like conversation. That all takes place through the platform. And so there's a clock on it, a time, so the clock ticks down. When your time is up, your time is up. So that's a feature that's available on the platform as well. Linda, I don't know if there's any other, if there's any other features you'd want me to touch upon. If not, I'll talk about why we feel some of these are relevant. Linda, you still there?
Yeah, no, I think that the one I'm most excited about is the ability to answer a question with a 30-second video clip, because
Right.
there's so many times where it's like, oh, I want to respond. And it's like, I don't have time to type out a response, but I could take 30 seconds
Right.
and, have the person that is getting my response feel a much more personalized connection. And it's a way for thought leaders to be able to showcase themselves more fully than just the written word can. So really, really excited about that feature. And it's something that, you're probably going to have a lot of copycatters, when it's one
When
of
it's
those
out there.
things that sparks conversation. You can have back and forth, and
Right.
just a great way to connect. And it's kind of like with Twitter, you have to only use so many characters when you're answering a question, knowing that you got to keep it tight and you have about 30 seconds. I think that's going to be really great to just dial people into giving concise and informative answer to the question. So yeah, it's an exciting feature we're happy to have coming on the platform.
Have a platform. Great. And again, there are many other features that we have. This chart basically shows what we feel is the analog, but the goals, the sort of high level goals of what we're trying to accomplish is, one, we're trying to foster community, and that's no different than what a lot of other platforms are doing at some level.
What I just
Sure.
thought of one of the features that I think is really great, especially for people that are doing their social media communication inside of a business environment. Having the ability to be in a group and have your interaction in the group actually occur through your email. Where if something happens in the group, you can get an email of someone else's message, but then you can respond to that email, and you never have to interface actually on the platform. So visually, anybody seeing you answer emails, and not be in a social media setting. So to me, that's just a great feature for professionals, to be able to keep their interaction professional, but still be engaging in more of a social interaction. So yeah, that's another one of the fun features.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch if you sort of go around this chart, and these are features that can be toggled on or off depending on what other platforms the company organization may already be using. But we're really trying to move these platforms to meet sort of three goals. One is that it creates community for that particular partner of ours or a client. Second, that allows the organization as well as the participants to get involved with promotion or their own marketing to the extent that's important to them. So they are rewarded because a lot of this content that is generated here gets very high on search engines. That is the content that's made public, the content that's available. it gets very high on search engines. So if you're trying to have a voice and you're trying to get information that's out there in a professional way, this, again, we can show lots of examples how the content created on a Brainsy powered platform on the blockchain ecosystem can rise really high in search results. And then the final sort of leg of our value proposition is that we're really looking to find ways to create monetization opportunities for the participants as well as the organization. So again, if you have a call with someone, you can get paid for that. If the platform is set up for certain rewards, basically we can funnel corporate sponsorship money into a bounty, some of that into a bounty that then gets paid out to the content creators. And so that's something where people who are participating can earn some rewards and get recognized for what they're doing. And we're looking at lots of other features that allow for that monetization of both the participants as well as the platform partner, because again, that's how we get away from the monoliths. We believe that's how we get away from some of the monolithic platforms that are out there today. And again, there are three things that are unique. There's this private label branding of the community with all these different features. There's ability to create this customized rewards program. And then we are agnostic to the type of reward that's used. So it can be fiat currency, it can be cryptocurrency, it could be loyalty points. Really, our platform is set up to plug and play. And with the blockchain chamber, currently we're using Stellar, but it could be another type of crypto that's built in there for the rewards. And then finally, as we talked about in the past, we really see social media moving to a new paradigm. In the past, the corporate or organizations were very much using a broadcast model, digital communication, sort of the radio model. You send a signal out, you don't get much back. And then they would use third-party social media for all that interaction that's taking place with their stakeholders. And that's the value that social media provides. They allow for that interaction, and they allow for that in a way that's at least you're not writing a check for it. It seems cheap because it oftentimes they're free. But in that case, you're renting the audience. There's all these issues that have to do with who's actually managing those audiences. So the new paradigm is that we bring all that interaction into the organization, allow them to basically use rewards, to do whatever they want, to have the tools to do that interaction. And we don't say that people should just abandon traditional social media outright. I mean, for the most part, we're trying to as much as we can, but just to use that as a broadcast mechanism, less as an interactive. And by doing that, organizations are really taking more control of their audience. They're owning their own audiences, as opposed to letting their audiences be subjected to these faraway organizations and companies who are making decisions about what's happening. So those are the key points I wanted to make, and how what we're doing with the chamber, and then where we see the industry going as it relates to how social media can benefit from blockchain as well. So Linda, any other closing things I should comment on?
No, thank you. That was fantastic. I think you gave scope for why it's necessary. You and Tavonia both, I learned some things that I wasn't aware of previously, and it's interesting to be looking at a future and saying, okay, it doesn't always have to be the way